Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of Art of the Beholder, a show dedicated to all things eclectic in the world of art. I'm your host, Novo Day, and today we're going to be talking about art and the arts again with our ever-evolving open discussion segment, Is It Art? Focusing today on more of the business side of things, guys. Specifically, something we've talked about many times on the show, but never focused on until today, and that is the eternal arts and commerce conversation. Now, we're going to talk about art and commerce, and part of a new paradigm that includes art's fraternal twin, and that is entertainment. So, art, entertainment, and commerce will be the focus of today's discussion. So there's no theses, no gems, just unadulterated discussion.
No theses, no feces, just right to it.
To hash things out, you already heard him, guys, so let's introduce him.
I couldn't wait.
And that is Mr. Philip Church of philipchurch.com. Welcome back.
Hello. Thank you for having me yet again.
Indeed. This is the year of Philip. So guys, get comfortable.
Banner year, baby.
Philip's going to be the regular of regulars this season. But before we joke about that a little more, let's tell the good people why. And why are we talking about this today? Well, as one does, I got lost in YouTube, death spiral of YouTube videos over and over again. I tend to gravitate towards video essays, no surprise, since our show is kind of built on that. The talk show format is built on the audio essay in our case. But the video essay has a special place in my heart as well. I'm looking at you, Nerd Writer. You guys are great. But of course, with our, we were joking about this in backstage, me and Philip, about outrage culture that takes all the air in the room, because that's what that's what gets the clicks. Yeah, that gets the clicks, that gets the eyeballs, that gets the people to stay on the social media, and that of course increases ad revenue. And I got one of those after I watched The Last of Us Season 2, and the title is, if you guys want to check it out, the title is The Last of Us. The Last of Us HBO is a Disney remake. And essentially, the video essay was arguing that The Last of Us Season 2 was so bad that it devolved into a Disney remake. And I found myself disagreeing with a lot of points because, yes, AOTB can be artsy fartsy, and yes, we like deep dives and we talk about, Frank Zappa, but sometimes as artists, sometimes we just want entertainment. And I remember thinking to myself, there's a thin line between those two worlds, and though they are very different and they are distinct, there is overlap and there is a thin line. And though something like The Last of Us Season 2, yes, was it inferior to Season 1? Absolutely. I'm not going to disagree with that. But was it bad? No, not really. It was fine because it leaned more on the entertainment.
Like on paper, it checks out. It's just that it was not as many people's cup of tea.
Right. And there was a lot of reasons, and this is not really the show for that, but just to give you a few, it veered
from... Oh, wait, it's not?
Well, we're going to talk about the bigger picture. This is just the primer to talk about why we're talking about the bigger picture, but I digress, because here's the deal. The Last of Us Season 2 did veer away from its source material, and it didn't do what every great adaptation does, is it didn't adapt. In Season 1, we did a whole show on episode 3, long time, where in the medium that is film and television, we were able to adapt a video game story and have a story that wasn't able to be told in the game, adequately or well. And Season 1 did that amazingly. In fact, I will go on record right now saying that season 1, episode 3, long time, is probably one of the best episodes of television I've seen in maybe the last decade. Like that is a screenplay that I've studied to write screenplays. Now, with that being said, to circle back to The Last of Us Season 2, yes, it had its problems. Yes, it had its flaws. Yes, it did veer away from the source material, and that is probably where it went wrong. There's probably too many cooks in the kitchen, too, if you know what I'm saying. There was probably a lot of things behind the scenes that led to what we got as the final product. But ultimately, was it bad? No. Did it deserve this kind of criticism? No. And that made me think of how art and commerce has a very unique relationship with entertainment, because sometimes we just want a product. Sometimes we just want to be entertained, and it doesn't have to try to change our lives or something like that. Sometimes we just need to escape, and we just want to be entertained as the audience, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I defend you, The Last of Us Season 2, even though, yes, you're inferior to Season 1. But with all of that being said, with that primer, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. And soon, we're going to be talking art, entertainment, and commerce. Stay with us.
This show is supported by philipchurch.com. Need a professional voice for your project? Whether it's a commercial, podcast, audiobook, or other, I deliver high-quality voiceover and narration services that match your vision. And with fast turnarounds, crisp audio, and a range of tones and styles to suit your needs, isn't it time to bring your story or brand to life? So let's get going. Visit philipchurch.com, that's Philip with one L, to find demos, samples, and contact information. And with this voice, let's make that next project unforgettable.
And we are back to do the thing to conquer the world. So we're going to do what we usually do on these kind of shows, Philip, and we're going to structure the show with a past, present, and future. So we're going to give a little history with the past, we're going to talk about the present, and then we're going to have fun talking about what the future may hold. So to understand the history of art and commerce, this has been around for millennia. Traditional art and commerce, think of ancient artisans, think of merchants, think of the ancient Greeks, guys. There was plays, there was theater. There was a lot of things where people were showing up, they were buying a ticket to watch the arts.
Yeah, even beyond just that literal, like the theater art. I mean, there are some of the most famous things, you think about like the relics that the things that people made, yeah, you could have made a functional pot, but they decorated it.
Right. They painted it.
Yeah, there was a story literally etched into it. They took time to share something that they found meaningful.
And the commerce relationship comes in because they sold said piece of art to some patron. And they're like, and for whatever the currency was at the time. And that evolved into things that we see throughout history in medieval times: gladiatorial games, gestures, street performers. Think of epic poems, folk tales, oral traditions, fairs, festivals, court entertainment. So ballet, masks, Gregorian chants, troubadours, minstrels, Baroque, classic. Guys, you get the point. Okay. So art and commerce has had a long and fascinating relationship, and it is nothing new, but it has always had an interesting relationship. And it has definitely evolved and changed in the last century because entertainment has evolved from the arts purely for entertainment's sake. So if we're speeding up to more modern examples, probably what, Philip, 18th century, 19th century, definitely before the last literal century, we had the circus, we had illusionists, we had still singers, songwriters, bards that would, be paid to essentially tour. But the question is how do you feel like traditional art eventually evolved into entertainment?
Well, and I guess it's interesting that there's still, it's not like as if as if art wasn't entertainment before, and as if art and or entertainment, when those bled, weren't also part of commerce, because, there were, like for instance, like Shakespeare. It's not like people talk about like, oh, he clearly made like, £1 million. He was the richest man in London or whatever.
Yeah.
Stratford upon Avon, wherever he lived. But it's interesting that when technology and just industry really revolutionized right around the turn of the last century, and the world became more globalist, that there's just more like people's views of the world just couldn't help but be expanded, that there was kind of an offshoot where some people just, were just, crank out the hits, or like, you can tell that some people were in it for the money. I don't know if it was necessarily knee-jerk reaction to that, or if it coincided with it because there are always people that do it for the love of it.
Sure.
That people seem to have grabbed onto the concept of continuing to do it for the love of it and honoring the things that they grew up loving.
I think you make an interesting point, because that's why art and commerce, I think, has always had an interesting relationship, because the artists that have always done it either for themselves or for the love of the game, for the love of the craft, they didn't care about how much money they could make or what could come of it. And it wasn't the focus.
Yeah. And there's other interesting aspects of it, because sometimes too, like when I think of older forms of art and the way that has changed, in that these days, when I think of furniture, I think of modern stuff. I think of IKEA or Amazon garbage.
Still art,
like, not saying that
way,
IKEA
like
is garbage
design.
necessarily, but like there have been things that, like even desks, like, furniture that were such truly art. And like the amount of passion as well as know-how that had to go into, like, whether it was one or three people, doing all the things that it involves, of just like getting the lumber, turning it into, like getting like from raw goods to the whole production, and not just saying this is a table with four legs, like the flourish, the painting of it, the decoration. That to me is also what I think of even in older art. And it's interesting too that you had patrons, right? That like there were people who they literally just paid to be like, just keep doing what you do because it's so great. And sometimes they were or were not royalty themselves. Sometimes they just knew them and they were just high in society and had the money to say, hey, you make such a good desk and I know it took you a year, but make me another one.
Well, and there was the Renaissance too, and like these famous painters and sculptors, the Michelangelos, the Da Vincis, that were eventually commissioned to do these, and they were making more money. There was an evolution to the commerce side of it, and I don't think it was ever exploited until the last few centuries, and something that evolved into having art become entertainment for commerce sake. But I think a lot of it, pre the last few centuries, was purely for trade, right? Here's the thing I made, give me a shilling, give me a
I worked my off on this, like, you're gonna
so
pay
I
me
can
what
buy
I'm owed.
bread,
Yeah, it's like my family is starving because I've been making this desk for 2 months. I'm gonna be focusing on desks entirely.
This
just
whole
in
show
case
is going to be turning into furniture, guys, so buckle up, because
I may
we're
or may
going to
not have
talk
bought a lot
about
of shares. No, I'm kidding.
Afghans and
I don't know shares in anything. But no, I specifically with trades.
credenzas. Is that?
Yeah, that's a very good type of desk.
That's a credenza. Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting seeing how things went from trade to commerce, and other things went from trade into being so
Well, trade is a
inspired
form of
or
commerce,
motivated.
where it was very unilateral. It wasn't.
Or yeah, sorry, I think I said something completely stupid a second ago.
No. You did it. You did it. But yeah,
art being turned into trade or commerce, and then other things being like almost like a chicken and the egg too, right? Like,
right.
was it that the art, they wanted to do it and they just happened to be so good they made money, or was it that they need money and they realized like, well, I can sand the hell out of some wood and make it so smooth that you could write on it and not get splinters? It's really interesting thinking about those things, and just knowing that a lot of it, luckily, it's both. In a way, I think it's fun to know that it is both, that it doesn't matter which one is the chicken and which one may be the egg, much less which one could have come first, and that there have always been people that just did it because, my dad gave me this guitar and I just love strumming it and just shouting. Like, you don't have to necessarily be great at it to be able to love art and love something and and perform it. And so I like knowing that people do it for the love of it, and that some people are so good at it that even though they do it for the love of it, it becomes a trade. It's a natural process, and it makes perfect logical sense too, because you're like, yeah, you know what? I spend so much of my time doing this that I'm not holding down a different job. Like, cool. I'm glad people want to pay me for this.
And that's where they become like craftsmen. and craftsmen's and,
Yeah.
where.
And that goes on to inspire a whole nother generation of just like, man, that guy did that so great. I'm not good at the guitar, but like,
Or it becomes a
I get so
family trade.
yeah, I get so inspired during that music that like, man, I just need to chisel something. Like, I'm going to make a statue, and it's
Or a
neat how art
chair.
begets
We're going to
art.
focus on furniture some more.
I was trying to get away from it.
No, I'm bringing it back.
My corporate overlords only need so many plugs. But yeah, I like that it's a neat intermingling that it, especially across when it is purely entertainment, when it is for commerce, and when those blend. And I like seeing that there are very wonderful and very interesting examples of each.
Well, I think I have a hard time seeing or trying to look in the history of these things and trying to find that Franz Ferdinand, that Genesis moment of like, okay, when did it cross over? And I feel like we're seeing a little bit of that in the last few centuries with the like traveling circus, anything that has to tour, or the illusionist, or very rarely was the singer. And I think part of the once the men, and very few women, but mostly men, let's be honest, let's exploit these forms of art to make a lot of money. And that's when it started to turn more into entertainment. And probably when I tried to really dig deep, it's probably when there was an opportunity for them to repackage these things. Like when we had television and we're like, this singer can become more than a singer. They can become kind of this almost godlike figure to the audience, to these people, because they're on something like the television. And then once the ability to mass produce, merchandise and all these things around this godlike figure, they were able to realize there was so much money to be made. And we started to notice that something like the art, that the easy example of that is something like music, became more entertainment. Like they want to be entertained. Entertaining the audience became more important than the art that was the foundation to create the entertainment. And we start seeing that in the last few centuries, and then obviously speeding up to today. If you're listening to this way into the future, because we're huge stars now, it's 2025, and we have these macrocosms of overlapping art and entertainment. And we have television, but we also have film, we have gaming, we have traditional things. That's why we like the painters and the photographers, but we also have overlapping things such as the musician who becomes the film actor, things like that. And that's what creates the brand and vis-a-vis the franchise.
I do think another aspect that at least occurred to me as I was thinking about this topic is I'm going to take my hoodie off. I'm not getting weird. It's like
I did hear that zipper.
I'm going to explain this.
What is happening?
I was wearing a hoodie.
We're gonna get a lot. We're just got a little sexy in here. Got a little steamy in here.
Look, man, things are changing. The show is growing.
Yeah, we were talking
about exploiting.
We're talking backstage about marketing opportunities. I didn't think of that one. That was sex does sell.
The show does, baby. No. So
but
another
it was
thing,
a hoodie. It was a hoodie for the record.
Yeah, it was a hoodie. I'll take a picture of it. Another thing that I found interesting that occurred to me thinking about this too is that not that life isn't hard now. Life has its challenges these days still, of course, and it always will. But life used to be so many more and different types of hard. And I do think the escape of just purely seeing and doing something for the sake of like, well, we buried my neighbor and like my children are starving, that the escapism used to mean a lot more.
Yeah.
For a lot more of people, that it's just like there and there was just less to do. There wasn't Netflix. There weren't even bands. Again, like with the more modern forms of things like, oh, the circus is coming to town. That concept is still like in the grand scope of
people would work,
art and mankind.
People would go to bed, people would wake up and work and go to bed.
And it was wild that again, you didn't like, oh yeah, Jimmy died at the factory today, like oops. That luckily doesn't happen too much anymore, at least not in our country, luckily. Unfortunately, that's, not everywhere, but still, not to like diverge into that. But just, I think that's another reason that art meant a certain thing up to a certain point, and that to go back to to sort of piggyback on my own point earlier about industrialization and like globalization and stuff, that again, like that the need for art and what people wanted out of art and entertainment also changed with the fact that, like, hey, we have like most people have houses with four walls. Like, people are dying less than ever. We're living longer. And then as a result, people can even contribute more, whether that is them finding their own niche of art and just doing something small and local of like, hey, we're going to put on a contest, come to our little town fair, and just doing something for the sake of community.
Yeah.
And in keeping that sense of community alive before at least like our digital era. And that was interesting how, again, like industry led to that aspect of changing what people needed and wanted, and could then sort of get out of art, and how they could change it to kind of improve it and make it more approachable, which of course there's always those people looking to make a gain, those opportunists that are like, well, hell, like so many people came to, Betsy's pie cook-off, like I'm going to charge for tickets next time. But we're also going to have, songs, and we're going to get some artists, and I will make sure to take the ticket sales. And, some of it's going to go to the artists, and I'll donate a little bit of it to, like the church or a charity. And then I'm still going to walk home with, $200 at the end of the day. And it's just, like I said, those like opportunities just literally were not there before. And it is neat watching those intersections, those things playing off of each other, just given what was going on in society, that, no one was being oppressed by a horrible tyrant anymore. And so therefore they were a little happier and luckily got to make more or better art, or that art evolved. And it wasn't just one dude sculpting or one dude making beautiful desks that the king bought, that all of a sudden, like, again, like there's multiple people in like a choir, like the people are alive longer, and we've got old John tells the best stories. Like, he's been alive so long, and like keeping older traditions alive in that transition to more modern society.
With that being said, let's pivot to the present. And I want to start this discussion with the image of the inverted triangle paradigm. Okay, so think of a inverted pyramid. Okay, so the foundation is
Upside
the top.
down for you non-brainiacs.
So the foundation's at the top, and it goes to a sharp point at the bottom. Now at the top, at the 2 points at the top, is our babies, art, entertainment. And at the bottom, the bottom of the pyramid where those two connect, is commerce, right? So let's talk about the top first, art and entertainment, especially in our modern era, to your point. Now that we have everything, we have the Netflix and the podcasts and the murder shows.
Yeah, everybody's got a microphone and the internet.
And everyone has a talk show like us. There are traditional forms of art, the writers, the written content versus TV and film and painting and all these little things. And eventually their relationship is they get turned. Yes, there is the Disneyification of things, to the point in our intro primer of like, there's always going to be the people that criticize things and compare it to Disney after a while. But there is a lot of art that evolves into entertainment. And that was The Last of Us. The Last of Us was before it was a game, it was an amazing story, right? Neil Druckmann, I believe, he had to write and direct this piece and flesh it out and make it into something. And the way he got it to his audience is through gaming. And then that game was adapted to a television series. And so now in that television series then evolved from a very artistic piece to just a form of, and arguably, in my opinion, a piece of entertainment. Though it was less artistic, it was still very captivating. It was still a great product. And sometimes that's all we want. We just want to be entertained. We just want a product. You know what I watched with TV Del Rio just last night, and I felt that way, is arguably the greatest screenplay of all time, which is Back to the Future. I remember can you hear the gasps? Del Rio's never seen Back to the Future, so we watched it for the first time yesterday.
What?
Yes, I grew up with Back to the Future. The point is that when she was done, she enjoyed the movie, and she was like, that was a fun little story, and I realized, I was like, after rewatching it, it was just entertainment. It didn't make me think about, the cosmos, or meditate on my, Socrates idea, self and identity, and all of these, existential metaphysical things. It was just a story about a kid that got trapped in the past and wanted to get back to his own time. And I still, to this day, let's do a little T-Buck tangent corner. That climax, when he is in the past and Doc Brown is having to use the lightning to power the time machine and get him back to his present. That is some of the most captivating cinema of all time. Like, we all know what's going to happen. We've seen it a million times. We know what's going to happen. He's going to succeed. But I was like, oh God, the car's not working. Oh God, the cable broke. Oh God, Doc Brown has to zip line down. Oh, it was like, you knew it was going to work out, but how it was cut and shot and, again, written, it was all from that screenplay, is such a masterclass. But it was just entertainment. It was just us to, we wanted to root for the hero. We wanted to root for Marty McFly. And you come out the other side, just feeling so good. Was it artistic in a technical sense? Absolutely. It's still a film. They have writers, they have directors, they have cinematographers, but it was a form of art to just entertain us.
Yeah, it does feel like just within the last 10, maybe 15 years, though, but especially with the advent of Netflix
Back to the
and
Future
such.
is 40 years old. That's a
Yeah,
40th,
that's wild.
40th anniversary. Do you feel old now?
How do you know I didn't already? Yeah, it's unfortunate that it does feel more than ever. And I'm sure everybody has said this, right? I'm sure people who were, whether in the 40s, 50s, 60s, looked at the 60s, 70s, 80s and were like, oh, and it used to be art. Like, people used to this, that, and the other. I'm sure I'm just now the old fuddy-duddy, just being like, people used to do it differently, and these days it's just bullshit. But, like, it does feel that worse than ever. It's funny
I like
feeling
your
like a
old
stereotype, but
man voice. That was great.
yeah, what can I say? But it does feel like that sometimes, unfortunately, to where you're like, this really didn't need to be made, but I feel like someone just threw a bunch of keywords into, like, someone else's script that they're like, oh, I know how we could make this better, and it'd make us $1 million, and that they went into it with purely for the sake of, like, we're gonna
Art by
I
committee.
want to make a bunch of money.
And that is we're not there yet, but yes, we'll put a pin in that. That is the side that is the entertainment to commerce paradigm. So every part of the triangle has a relationship with each other, right? Entertainment and commerce. And then in the last, probably, since 2007, since the birth of social media, there's been a huge relationship with just commerce and entertainment. And we'll get to there in a minute. But first, let's talk about art and commerce. Let's talk about the left side of that pyramid. Or maybe the right side in your head. Whatever side. It doesn't matter.
I'm a very visual person. Please make up your mind.
The left side is the art.
Okay.
And the bottom is still commerce. So art, let's talk art and commerce for a second, because it does have a strange relationship, especially as we speed up to the present time. So, like we already talked about in the history primer, it used to be kind of a 1-to-1 ratio. Here's the thing. Here's the money I think it's worth. You give me the money. Have a good day. Thank you. But now it has turned into art and commerce is, I'm a struggling artist, but I got bills, I got taxes, and the modern behemoth that is our socioeconomic landscape.
I feel so seen.
How do we make our art marketable and enough to sell, but also make a living off of? A lot of people can't do that. So what do? They either just, to Philip's point, they make the art for the love of the craft, or they do it for themselves, to Allie's points when she's on the show. So there's not a 1-to-1 ratio, I feel like, anymore. It's not very unilateral. I think people are usually trying to maximize what they can do with what they have to get as far as they possibly can. But that can still be subjective, and that could still be, personal. Like, their ideas of success may be very different than ours. So there's nothing wrong with that. But on the opposite end of that is we have the artists that simply want to be either rich and famous, and they're doing it for the commerce. They're doing it for the other end of the thing, even if it's not the like film by committee example. So it's not quite entertainment to commerce relationship. They're still artists, but they may have a purpose in creating their art that is more than just the art.
To certain people's point, if you really are with everybody has bills and responsibilities.
Yeah.
And there really is a threshold for every person. It will vary, but everyone has that threshold where they're going to say, if I'm going to invest so much time in this thing, what all do I get out of it? And then
Sure.
depending on the amount of time, the amount of effort, and potentially the amount of money even put into it in the first place, where it only even seems fair to get something back. And it doesn't have to be a one-to-one. It doesn't have to be a get-rich thing. It can literally just be like, I would love to at least break even.
Sure, true.
And
Very
that
true.
there can still also be a bit of, to be a little altruistic, there still could be also the fact that like, well, I've spent all this money and I know so much that I'm going to teach other people and give them a leg up, right? That there are benefits to those things to where
Welcome to
people make it.
AOTP.
Right, when people making art out of their own art to get almost meta with it, that like they get so good at their craft that they get to the point where even they're like, I could help other people do this. Like I want to
There's a
see more
teaching
art in my
element.
community. Yeah, and also just networking and sharing art and spreading art, and just knowing how different things affect people. And so you're like, yeah, I want to put good out into the world. I want more good things in this world. And part of the way that you can do that is to find ways to just, be able to increase that. And there's, to an extent, also like nothing wrong with the fact that like, yeah, like if you have a really good teacher and that person busted their for however long, also invested in it to an extent, it's like, there's a certain amount of fairness and just regular rationale that goes into the fact that like, yeah, getting something in return after that much effort, that doesn't cheapen anything. It's reasonable, I think.
Yes, but the relationship, I think, is we have to make a point that the relationship, the con of the situation, especially in modern times, is that the relationship does work both ways. There is a commerce effect on the arts, and that's how we've talked about this in other shows where we have the art dealers and we have the art dynasties and the people that are exploiting the artists for their own profit. And so that
Oh
is
yeah,
where we have
unfortunately,
to
there's always
have.
bad actors. Yeah.
Right. And that's where finding, whatever end of the spectrum you're on is finding the balance to make sure that you're still working within these industries, but, yeah, being ethical about them and, yeah, trying not to be a bad actor for sure.
Yeah, it stinks that there's always bad apples, that there's always been scammers, there's always been people looking to take advantage of others. Regardless, they are just looking to get theirs. And so unfortunately that is, yeah, the kind of the dark side of commerce to an extent, that people get so greedy, and so entitled that they feel like I deserve to do this. I can of course do this. If they're stupid enough for this to happen, then I deserve to make my money and they can lose it. That it sucks that has to be a thing, and it is sadly, in my opinion, inevitable because it is just part of human nature. People have always existed, and it's not going to go away. And so it's unfortunate that fuels a dark side of that, because if you do take that out of it, if you take commerce, I do think you get a bit more pure art, a bit more
Sure.
honest, passionate art kind
Or
of
if it's just
stuff.
not the focus, if you're not making
Yeah.
the art for the audience should be, I've always said this, the audience should be on the list, but they shouldn't be number one. They should
Yeah.
be somewhere in the middle, somewhere. So for some artists at the bottom, so you're not making the art specifically for just to entertain or just to make a product just for them. You should make it for yourself, or there should be a compromise. And yeah, some of the best, I think a perfect example of that is music. When music feels pure and honest, and you can tell they were at a certain place and they made this. That's why the Breakup album exists. That's why Sea Change exists and stuff like
Yeah.
that, because they're in a place and they wanted to channel their emotions into their art. They happen to be a singer-songwriter, and so they put it into their music, and it feels so real. And they realize they made it really for themselves, but they shared it with the world. And that's where And
it
that's
was
where
relatable.
and that's where we get this intersection of something very special. But speaking of people, I think it's about time to talk about the relationship between entertainment and commerce. Speaking of Disney, I mean, just people. No, I like Disney.
I thought you were going to reference a certain HW, Warvey Heinstein.
Oh no. Well, yeah, I will talk about studio heads in this segment. Yes. So there are. So that was good. There are the Warvey Heinsteins of the world.
Didn't say it.
But I do understand the criticisms, especially like, that video essay we talked about in the intro, and because entertainment and commerce have a completely very similar but very different relationship, because now it is probably more about maximizing that revenue and those profits and those profit margins and things like that. And that's when I do like Disney for I've really enjoyed Andor. Disney execs, you did a good job there, guys. Okay, pat yourselves on the
You
back.
get one cookie.
Pat yourselves on the back. We like Andor, so shut the fuck up. But you can see that, to the video essayists, in his defense, the remakes of like The Lion King and like Aladdin, or what was the really bad Snow White? That was like
Aladdin was pretty too, though.
Atrociously bad. Well, but the main argument, the overall, not this YouTubers, but like the world over, is like, well, we already have the story. It was already it was already in this form. It's animated. Why are we remaking it into live action? And a lot of people will argue, oh, because they want to make a bajillion dollars, because these kids have grown up and now they have kids, and now they know that they're going to buy 4 tickets instead of 2 tickets, and they're going to double their returns. So is it going to change your life? Is it artistic? Probably not. Is it going to make you think about your existentialism and all of these very thought-provoking things? No.
It shouldn't.
But is it entertaining? Yes.
Yeah.
And is it going to make those studio execs, those Warvies of the world, a lot of money? And that's probably why they're doing it? Absolutely yes. But yeah. I think sometimes there's nothing wrong with that. Is the hardest pill for us artists to swallow. That sometimes we have to just make entertainment and products for entertainment and products' sake.
I 100% agree. I love looking for like the little secrets, the Easter eggs, the nuggets, right? In something, when I'm like, oh, I wonder what the writer meant by this, or oh, the director really kept that thing in the frame. That is a thing that I love to do. Whether it's a book, a movie, video game, but like the ways that people work art in, all throughout a project, not just on its surface, but like, the different layers, the depths and stuff.
We got layers.
But there's also times where I'm like, holy shit, I loved Alien versus Predator Requiem. Everybody died. Everybody just basically got like a body bag at the end, and I could not have given less of a shit. I didn't learn anything from it. I didn't like grow as a person, and I walked out like pumping my fists like, yeah, Predator, woo! Like I'm for that. It is sometimes, again, just because life isn't the same as feudalism or being
I want that cloaking tech Predator, wow!
I know. Yeah, so just because we're not still under feudalism or like in a serfdom doesn't mean that life doesn't still deserve some escapism, and that after a hard day's of work, I just want to watch 2 aliens beat the shit out of each other. That's okay. Those things are perfectly fun. Like a popcorn movie serves just as much purpose as a real, head scratcher, as like, your favorite
like
sci-fi
film.
Yeah, like they both are necessary, because you really do, like, sometimes, you feel like digging deep and being like, wow, I really relate to this. Like, I cried through that whole movie. It really reminded me of this thing in my own life, which is why you went to see it in the first place. And then other times you're just again, you're happy that you're just doing something silly. It's completely unrealistic, and you'll just never see it in your life. You will never see a xenomorph, and I forget what the hell Predator's real species names.
Predators.
I think that's what we call them. I do wonder if they ever gave them their official name. But anyways, and it's funny. That's just, again, that's one of my big examples.
But that's the paradox, right? Like, as artists, we're not supposed to admit to that. We're not supposed to be like,
I'm not.
I just want to see the xenomorphs and predators fight, because I think it is talking about the relationship between these two worlds now, so like a dot in the middle of these two paradigms, is there is purity contest going on of like, well, this isn't real art. And I'm like, well, sure it is. It just doesn't have to be thought provoking. It can be entertainment. And the entertainment, and then vis-a-vis the entertainment can be artistic. It can be like, I know that there's a million and one examples of this, but think of your favorite example where you were entertained, but then you got that little nugget of wisdom that really stuck with you. And you're just like, oh,
We were the predator all along.
I never thought about it that way. I was the xenomorph all along. And then we have so just like there's a relationship with commerce to art, there is a relationship to commerce to just entertainment. All right. So this is like the worst of it, the worst of the worst, the most evil shit. And this is really just a product of very much our time. So social media and then AI.
It's interesting to me too that when you get really into the commerce and entertainment section, that it also lends itself to things like toxic fandoms, that it almost begets more negativity. And so people who, for instance, like try to add depth or act like gatekeepers and like, oh, they're not a real fan, or like that character would never do this. Like, I get that critique is normal and natural, and I'm not saying people shouldn't do that, but there gets to a point where, like, people like bully other people and just go so far beyond.
I feel like that's at the top of the pyramid. That's art versus entertainment. So? Yeah, or entertainment.
I feel like that's in the
art.
Commerce section, because I'm talking about like, again, like to go Disney, but like I feel like that's like all the Marvel movie stuff to an extent, or like Star Wars that like people like crap on each other and be like, that movie's so stupid, like blah blah blah. Like I feel like you don't see that when you're talking about things that are more in the sense of art, of just pure like actually making art, and as opposed to these big box office blowouts that are meant to draw millions of people. And when you get that many people, you the ratio goes up, and that there's going to be more negativity too. So I that's another thing that at least occurred to me thinking about it, of like, and that seems to me like it's in the entertainment and commerce section where it's less artistic, because again, like I don't get into fights with people about, A24 movies. I feel like there's a draw to the purity of art, or like just
not me,
a little more artistic stuff.
I have it here. I have a very concrete example for commerce, how commerce affects entertainment. And, we were joking about this backstage about the engines of outrage culture and stuff like that. And part of that is part of the reason there are studies dedicated to how social media has put us in these silos and these bubbles and all this stuff is actually the history of how news has evolved. So news used to be just the news.
Yeah.
Right? It used to be just the facts. Here's the facts. And
it was only for 1 hour.
Right? And a lot of very smart, albeit maybe evil people were like, well, how do we get people the schemers? Is that the Joker? It was good.
Yes.
And it was no surprise, a lot of conservative voices. They were like, well, how do we get people a little more on our side? We need to make the news more opinion based. And then the opinions turned into entertainment. And we got people like Rush Limbaugh and stuff like that. And then it turned into their own little feedback loops. Things started to migrate. People started to pick sides. And guys, we're art of the beholder. We're not going to tell you what side to pick. And we're not going to criticize one side or the other. Both sides do this now. Both the left, both the right. You decide
everywhere.
You decide where you want to be. But the point is that to understand how we got here is that commerce found a very smart way to profit off of people in the news sector, and that is through entertainment. So the news had to figure out how to be profitable and how to grow and how to have a million billion eyeballs on them. And they realized the best way to do that is through entertainment and hyperbole and exaggeration, to the point of altered facts, misinformation, and now disinformation. You decide where you want to be on that spectrum. That's not for us to decide. But the fact of the matter there is That's how it evolved.
Oh, the way that that's bled into social media too. I mean,
Oh,
all
yeah.
these things, these
Oh,
formulas, the
yeah.
same thing. It's just another business. Like it's not for letting people share their art. It's not for letting people stay connected. It's a business. And
Exactly.
and the most engaging things, unfortunately, people have learned. Again, it's rage bait. Is saying something blatantly wrong, if not downright offensive. And it doesn't matter. There's always somebody that you can offend. It doesn't matter what your viewpoint is. Again, if you are left and right, if you're talking politics, or if it's just art, but just getting out there and saying something crappy and mean does just make people go, hey, I don't agree. And then unfortunately now taking the time to put that comment on there, or to whether it was calling into the news station back in the day, that was attention. You were getting attention. People would go, they're not going to say that again, are they? And they would tune in to find out. And now you've got that in the same thing in the social media format, and it's the most vitriolic form of it. It's just the lowest of the low. I hate it.
I think the more important question is, where do we go from here? And that is where we talk
In the
about
words
the
of
future.
Axl Rose, where do we go now?
Where do we go now? I think there's nothing wrong with saying, guys, there's nothing, and this is for you infotainment extremists, is there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. I don't know where we're going to go on this one. Usually I have this big elaborate answer, and I honestly have no idea. All I know is
There's
that
nothing wrong with I don't know, and there's nothing wrong with I was wrong.
like intellectual humility of like, I
I
don't
didn't
know
know
what
that.
I
Oh,
d
you
I
were
don't know
right.
what I don't know, and I don't know we study this stuff for a living, me and Philip, and I have no idea how all these industries, art, entertainment, commerce are gonna evolve. I mean, we talk about AI a lot, but I still don't. I will say this. A lot of these things, there's a lot of cycles to these things. Think fashion. A lot of these things can be very cyclical, or you can look at them as pendulums. Right now, outrage sells, but that's why you guys should tell your friends about Art of the Beholder, because we want to be the absolute opposite of that. Maybe our audience will grow because maybe love will sell. Maybe love will sell.
You think we haven't thought about selling out ever? But no, it's more fun to entertain and talk about art. That's why we are Art of the Beholder. We almost rebranded to Entertainment of the Beholder.
It doesn't have the same
And then
ring
Behold
though.
the Entertainment. Like we've shopped this, guys, but
Ent of the
nothing to do with
Beholder,
commerce.
Tainment of the Beholder. It doesn't have the same ring as Art of the
Yeah.
Beholder. It doesn't roll off the tongue.
It really doesn't.
Going from point A to point B. What do you think the future holds, Philip?
There is a big chunk of I don't know, but also I think it's going to implode. I think it's going to get to the point.
Really?
I think it's going to get to the point
Like
where
it's not sustainable.
I don't think it's sustainable, and B, I think it will literally be proven that it's done such actual measurable harm to where something will eventually be done with it. I don't know what, and even saying that feels borderline like authoritarian or big brothery. And that
Oh,
terrifies me.
God.
I sadly think that
It
could
is
be a thing.
Orwellian. It is very
It
Orwellian.
is, but we also like sometimes things go that way. And then, even not even talking about just America, but just, things change, empires crumble. Entire like Roanoke could happen to an extent
Man,
of
this
just like
got
things just
real. We're
disappear.
getting real now.
So it's there's no way to know what could happen, but I do think that it's going to get to a point where the harm is going to just be the only thing that people think about it and remember about it, going to admit and just go down the I don't know. But I do really think that people will start to do things just for the purity of it, and that it will no longer be any fun because there will be nothing to find but potential outrage and strife and conflict. And that just doesn't serve much good purpose, although it can be a good impetus for change. So I don't see how it won't make change at some point in better or different ways than it already has.
I do think we should end on something we can all agree on, and that is this. We should never, ever remake Back to the Future.
Oh, yeah.
Can't we all agree we should never, ever remake Back to the Future, guys? And with that being said, thanks so much for listening. But we want to hear from you. What do you guys think? What does the future holds for art versus entertainment versus commerce? All its little paradigms. But until then, guys, thanks so much for listening. I want to thank you. As always, I want to thank my guest, Mr. Philip Church. And if you like that, you can always check us out at novodayproductions.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe. We appreciate it if you do all the things. You can follow us at @_Novo_day and days to E, and at AOTB.podcast and at AOTB podcast. One has a dot, one has no dot. So until next time, guys, you know what to do. Be good to each other. And as always, good luck and Godspeed. We love you.
Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Novo Day Productions. Created by Novo Day and Theodore T. Buckingham. Written, directed, produced, and edited by Novo Day and the NDP Collective. Starring Philip Church of philipchurch.com, that's Philip with one L. Alexandra Parsons of alexandraparsons.com, ALEXANDRA-PARSONS.com. With special contributions by Theodore T. Buckingham. Music by A Company, Instagram handle A_CO_music_. Logo design by Tom Justice of thejusticecompany.com, JESTUS. Thank you again for listening. All rights reserved.